Hello everyone, Camilla here from Decodable Readers Australia. Today we're going to focus in on the topic of vocabulary. Now, vocabulary is really the underpinning of reading comprehension and language comprehension. When we have a good vocabulary and we really understand words, then we have understanding of what we're engaging in through oral language as well as reading comprehension. Now, there are a few considerations when it comes to the teaching of vocabulary. As educators, we have to understand words, and so today we're going to have a look at the 3 tiers of words and where we should target our teaching. Our next thing that we're going to have a look at is implicit and explicit instruction. What are the differences and what should you have in your classroom instruction? And finally, we're going to hone in on the pedagogical approaches to explicitly teaching vocabulary and what's going to maximize that instruction. So let's dive straight in to an understanding of words, the 3 tiers of vocabulary. When we consider words, we can consider them in 3 different tiers. The first tier are those everyday words, familiar to most students. Most students have an extensive understanding of Tier 1 words because they are the words that they use to communicate with each other. They not only understand those words, but they can use them as well. For example, I am feeling happy. The word happy is quite an easy word to understand and use. Or go and get your book, or I'm feeling tired. These are words that students usually understand. Now, the only time you really need to teach Tier 1 words is if you've got students with either really poor oral language and communication skills, or students that have English as their second language. They're a language learner, and therefore some of that everyday language still needs to be explicitly taught. Next is our Tier 3 words. These are low frequency words, but usually subject specific. Tier 3 words really come in when you're teaching specific content. So for example, you're in a science lesson and you're looking at tornadoes or hurricanes or erosion. These types of words are really subject specific. They're low frequency unless we're using them in a specific topic. So those Tier 3 words are really subject specific, but they also require explicit teaching when looking at that content knowledge. And finally, our Tier 2 words. These are robust, high utility words used in multiple contexts, and usually students can gain an understanding of these words and their use through explicit instruction. It is at this level, that Tier 2 vocabulary word level, that requires both implicit and explicit instruction. So let's have a look at the difference between both. Implicit refers to the process of being in the moment and giving a brief description of a word so that understanding can be made. Now, you might be reading a story to your class and a word comes up that's a little bit more complex for their understanding. So a brief description based on the context in which the word is being used may be delivered to your students so that the flow of the text and understanding of the text can continue. So for example, you're reading a story and a little boy is distraught. The word distraught might need a little bit of explanation before continuing on. Now, it's important that when you're reading a story and words like this pop up, that it's not the full big explicit instruction, because then you lose the flow of the story. Just a brief introduction to the word so that understanding can be made and then continue on with the story. So that brings us to explicit instruction. That word can carry over to explicit instruction, but it's really important that explicit instruction is carefully planned. Targeted words that you've already worked out which words are going to be implemented in your programs, and having a teaching sequence around those targeted words. So let's have a look at your explicit teaching considerations so that you can make sure that you have effective practices when teaching your Tier 2 words. The first key consideration is to select Tier 2 words from an exposed text. It's important when selecting those tier 2 words and pre-planning that those words are selected from exposed text that students have been read to or that they are reading. Now, you may not realise, but Decodable Readers Australia actually incorporate vocabulary tier 2 words into their text. Now, it's not a known thing for decodables to actually incorporate tier 2 because usually the vocabulary is so simple and decodable. But here at Decodable Readers Australia, in the back of every book in our Series 1, we have a targeted tier 2 word. And it is either a word that appears in the book or an implied word. Now, in our Sounds of Reading toolkits, we actually have the vocabulary cards that match each book. It has the word, a child-friendly definition, which we'll get to, and a picture prompt to help assist the understanding and the use of those words. Number 2, take words beyond the text. It's important when explicitly teaching a new word, for example, the word fetch, that we first put it in context of the story. Then we need to take it out of context of the story and use it in multiple contexts. Number 3, give a word a child-friendly definition. It's really important when introducing a new tier 2 word that the definition is child-friendly. If we go to a dictionary definition, often dictionaries use complex vocabulary to define the word. So it's important that it is child-friendly. And what that means is that the definition is made up of tier 1 words, that everyday language. So for example, the word odor on this card is our child-friendly definition. An odor is a smell that is often not a nice one. Number 4, give examples and non-examples. It's important that the teacher gives loads of examples. So let's go back to our example of odor. The teacher might say, there was an odor coming from the gym bag, or the rotten banana was giving off a really bad odor. Once students really have an understanding of how this word is used in multiple contexts, you can then give some non-examples and ask the students whether that word is being used correctly or incorrectly. So a non-example might be, the freshly baked muffins were giving off a yummy odor. And then we'll talk about the odor actually means bad smell rather than good smell, and you can then identify it as a non-example of the word. So it's important that teachers give examples and non-examples. Number 5, have students give their own examples. Allow your students to give their examples in multiple contexts and give that corrective feedback as they attempt to use the new vocabulary. Number 6 is an optional mnemonic, an action or a picture prompt. Visual mnemonics are a great tool to use for vocabulary instruction. We have a picture prompt to assist the understanding of the new word. That picture prompt can then also be turned into an action prompt. We can explore or construct or allocate. And you can see that the action can really prompt the understanding of the new vocabulary. Number 7 is all about retrieval practice, revisiting learnt words. You can do this through questions using the words, decision continuums, forming so but because sentences with the new words. Like in any new learning, multiple exposures and cumulative practice are the keys to retention. So it's really important as educators that we provide multiple learning opportunities that incorporates this new vocabulary into the context of learning. Now, this can be through everyday conversation that you're having with your classroom or explicit instruction of sentence writing that incorporates the new vocabulary. Now, a few examples of this: as classroom teacher, I would incorporate the new words in conversation. So for example, the word was allocate. I would then use it in contexts like this: boys and girls, it's time to go to our allocated eating areas, or it's time to play on our allocated playground for that year level, or boys and girls, go back to your allocated desks. The more that they can hear the word in different contexts, the more likely that they are going to retain the understanding and then use those words. I really want to highlight this amazing resource. It's a book called Bringing Words to Life. It is extensive in its knowledge and ideas all around that robust vocabulary instruction. Definitely a resource to get your hands on. Vocabulary has been identified as a core component of the teaching of reading. So as educators, it's really important that we understand words, the different tiers of words, what the difference between implicit and explicit instruction is. We make sure that we plan for that explicit instruction of new vocabulary. And finally, that we have the right instructional approaches that are going to benefit our students and their retention of new vocabulary.